The wind, a phantom limb of autumn, swept through the sleepy town of Havenwood, Massachusetts, rustling the skeletal branches of ancient oak trees. It was a sound that seemed to carry forgotten whispers, a low, melancholic sigh across the worn shingles of colonial-era homes. Dusk was painting the sky in shades of bruised plum and fading amber, an ordinary spectacle for this quiet corner of New England. Yet tonight there was a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the air, a tension thrumming beneath the surface of everyday life, like a taut string vibrating just beyond the range of human hearing. The leaves, brittle and brown, skittered across deserted sidewalks, their dry scratching mimicking the rustle of secrets being dragged from forgotten corners. It was a silence that felt less like peace and more like a held breath, a collective pause before an inevitable, earth-shattering pronouncement. In his small, cluttered study, filled with stacks of dusty tomes and maps pinned haphazardly to a corkboard, Ethan Vance felt it. He sat hunched over a complex astronomical chart, a mug of lukewarm coffee forgotten at his elbow, his brow furrowed in a perpetual state of concentration. The air in the room was thick with the scent of old paper and something else, something metallic and ozone-like, which he had attributed to the approaching storm. But it wasn't just the storm. It was a primal thrum, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to originate not from the ground beneath him, but from the very firmament above. He traced a line across the star chart, connecting constellations that most people only glanced at casually, following the trajectory of a celestial anomaly that had been nagging at him for weeks. It was an object, faint and elusive, moving with an unnatural, almost purposeful grace through the outer reaches of the solar system. Something that shouldn't be there, yet undeniably was. Ethan was a man perpetually caught between two worlds, the tangible reality of his meticulously researched data and the haunting whispers of ancient myths that resonated far too deeply within his soul. He was an astrophysicist, yes, but one who dared to peer beyond the accepted scientific paradigms, driven by an insatiable curiosity that often bordered on obsession. His colleagues at the university saw him as brilliant, perhaps a bit eccentric, but ultimately harmless. They didn't see the way his eyes would linger on symbols in forgotten texts, or how a chill would run down his spine when he stumbled upon a passage describing sky gods and winged chariots. They certainly didn't know about the recurring dream, a persistent flicker behind his eyelids, of a colossal crimson planet, scarred and ancient, hanging ominously in a twilight sky. A dream that felt less like a figment of his imagination and more like a memory he couldn't quite grasp. Tonight, the dream felt closer than ever. A prickling sensation at the base of his skull, a sudden drop in temperature in the room, despite the sputtering radiator. He shivered, pulling his old Harvard sweatshirt tighter around him. The astronomical chart, now illuminated by the harsh glow of his desk lamp, seemed to ripple at the edges, the printed stars momentarily blurring as if caught in a heat haze. He blinked, rubbing his eyes, dismissing it as fatigue. But the feeling persisted. It wasn't merely the fatigue of long nights spent poring over data, it was a profound sense of unease, a premonition settling heavy in his gut like a stone. He stood up, pacing the small room, his gaze flitting from the charts to the bookshelf laden with books on Sumerian mythology, ancient astronaut theories, and forbidden archaeological findings. Was he finally losing his mind? Or was something truly stirring? Something immense and ancient on the edge of human perception? The air grew heavier, thick with an unspoken anticipation, as if the very atoms around him were vibrating with a secret. He remembered a particularly vivid instance from his childhood, a moment that had always lingered, unexplained. He was perhaps 8 years old, playing in the dense woods behind his grandmother's farm in rural Vermont. The sun had been shining, a perfect summer's day, but suddenly the light had dimmed, not as if a cloud passed, but as if the entire sky had momentarily taken a breath. A profound silence had fallen. The chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves, all ceased. And then a low, guttural hum had vibrated through the earth, shaking the ground beneath his bare feet. It lasted only seconds, then vanished, leaving the world bright and noisy once more. He had told his grandmother, who had simply smiled and said it was probably a distant tractor, but the memory had stayed with him, sharp and unsettling. It was the first explosion emotional, a seed of unease planted deep within him, suggesting that the world held mysteries far beyond rational explanation. Tonight, that seed felt like it was beginning to sprout, its tendrils reaching out, seeking something. He walked over to the window, pushing aside the heavy velvet curtains. Outside, the streetlights cast long, distorted shadows of the barren trees against the wet asphalt. A light drizzle had begun, washing the world in a hazy, reflective sheen. The town, usually so predictable in its rhythms, felt different. There was an expectant quality to the air, a silent hum that seemed to resonate not just within his study, but across the entire landscape. He looked up, past the rooftops and the bare branches, towards the vast, star-dusted canvas above. The anomaly, the elusive speck of light he had been tracking, was now just barely visible through his backyard telescope, a faint pinprick of light that shouldn't exist, yet undeniably did. It was an observation that shifted his perception, a subtle crack in the edifice of his scientific certainty. He wasn't seeing things. His calculations were correct. Something was out there, something massive, moving with an eerie sense of purpose. It was the first ripple, the whisper of an approaching wave. This tiny, distant point of light was more than just a celestial body. It felt like a key, unlocking a door he never knew existed. If this beginning has already made you rethink what you thought you knew, imagine what's coming next. So go ahead, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel right now. Because here, every video uncovers something few dare to show. The anomaly, barely a smudge against the inky canvas of the cosmos, occupied his every waking thought. It was a ghost in the machine of the solar system, a deviation from all known orbital mechanics, a profound mathematical impossibility that defied every established theory he had been taught. He spent the next several days in a blur of caffeine and frantic calculations, his fingers flying across his keyboard, inputting data from observatories around the globe, cross-referencing ancient star charts with modern telescopic readings. The object, which he had provisionally labeled the Wanderer, was undeniably large, impossibly old, and currently on a trajectory that, if his computations were correct, would bring it dangerously close to the inner solar system within the coming decades. Ethan Vance was a man tethered to the scientific method, yet haunted by a deeper ancestral understanding of the universe. He was 35, with a lean build, unruly dark hair that perpetually fell into his eyes, and a pair of piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. He wore his academic life like a comfortable, if slightly threadbare, sweater, preferring the quiet hum of his lab to the clamor of social gatherings. His childhood had been spent largely isolated, buried in books, fueled by a precocious intelligence that set him apart. He sought answers in the cold, hard facts of astrophysics, yet found himself inexorably drawn to the enigmatic narratives of forgotten civilizations. He was a seeker of truth, whether it was hidden in spectral analysis or carved into ancient cuneiform tablets. What he sought fundamentally was meaning, a grand unifying theory that could reconcile the quantifiable universe with the profound mysteries that hummed just beneath the surface of human consciousness. He feared ignorance, the comfortable blindness that allowed humanity to dismiss anything that didn't fit neatly into its current worldview. He carried a heavy burden, the weight of a fragmented memory, a whisper of something vast and terrible that he couldn't quite articulate. His routine was a precise, almost ritualistic dance. Early morning coffee, a quick run through the crisp New England air, then straight to his makeshift observatory in the attic of his modest home. He taught a few classes at the local university, mostly advanced astrophysics seminars, but his true work, the work that consumed his very being, was done in the solitude of his attic, surrounded by glowing screens and the whir of his custom-built telescope. He tried to forget the ridicule he'd faced in graduate school when he'd first dared to suggest that certain ancient texts might contain more than just allegorical truths, that perhaps they encoded astronomical observations far more sophisticated than modern academia was willing to admit. He'd learned to keep his more unorthodox theories to himself, cloaked in the acceptable language of scientific inquiry. But the nagging feeling, the deep conviction that there was a missing piece, a profound cosmic secret hovering just out of reach, had never truly left him. He was sitting in the university cafeteria one afternoon, absently stirring his soup, when he felt it again. That familiar chill, that faint vibration like a distant thunderclap. He looked up, his gaze sweeping across the bustling room, filled with the usual chatter of students and faculty. His eyes met those of Dr. Eris Thorne, a visiting professor from MIT, a renowned archaeologist specializing in Near Eastern studies. Thorne, a man with a stern academic demeanor and eyes that seemed to have seen too much history, paused in his conversation, his gaze locking with Ethan's. It was a fleeting moment, a mere second, but in that instant a profound current passed between them. It wasn't just recognition. It was a shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement of something unsettling, something beyond the mundane. Thorne's expression was unreadable, a mixture of caution and knowing, and then he quickly averted his eyes, resuming his conversation with a forced smile. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this story has truly resonated with you. So, empower this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who needs to hear this. The brief, unspoken exchange with Dr. Thorne ignited a spark within Ethan. It wasn't a revelation, not yet, but a confirmation, a subtle validation that he wasn't entirely alone in his esoteric pursuits. The air, already charged with an unseen energy, seemed to thicken further. The climate around Havenwood, which had begun with an almost imperceptible shift, now seemed to mirror his internal state. A growing storm on the horizon, not of rain and thunder, but of hidden truths and ancient awakenings. He couldn't shake the image of Thorne's eyes, those eyes that held a depth of knowledge and a hint of suppressed fear. It was a detail he noticed far too late in his initial analysis of the interaction, a detail that now haunted him. Thorne knew something, or at the very least, he suspected something similar. Driven by this new, albeit slight, shift in his perception, Ethan decided to take a calculated risk. He sought out Thorne after his lecture that evening, finding him packing up his notes, an aura of quiet intensity surrounding him. "Dr. Thorne," Ethan began, his voice a little more formal than he intended. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion, but I felt a connection earlier, in the cafeteria." Thorne slowly looked up, his movements deliberate, his gaze unwavering. "A connection, Dr. Vance. Do elaborate." His tone was polite, but his eyes were sharp, assessing. Ethan took a breath, plunging in. "I've been tracking a celestial anomaly, a large, non-stellar object in the Kuiper Belt, exhibiting highly unusual orbital characteristics. Its trajectory suggests a highly elliptical orbit, one that would take it deep into the inner solar system eventually. And its estimated size, it's significant." Thorne's expression remained impassive, but Ethan could detect a subtle tightening around his eyes, a faint flicker of recognition. "And what does this have to do with a connection in the cafeteria, Dr. Vance?" "The trajectory," Ethan continued, emboldened. "It aligns with certain ancient texts, Sumerian specifically. The descriptions of NIBIRU, the planet of the crossing, the 12th planet, home of the Anunnaki." A beat of silence stretched between them, heavy and profound. Thorn closed his briefcase with a soft click, his gaze now fixed on Ethan with an intensity that made the hair on Ethan's arms stand on end. "NIBIRU," Thorn murmured, the name rolling off his tongue like a forgotten incantation. "A myth, Dr. Vance. A fanciful tale of ancient peoples attempting to explain celestial phenomena they couldn't comprehend." His words were dismissive, yet his eyes betrayed a flicker of something else, not disbelief, but a profound weariness, as if he had heard this particular theory many times before, always with the same underlying dread. "Is it?" Ethan pressed, refusing to back down. "Or is it a memory encoded in myth, waiting for us to catch up?" He pulled a small, worn, leather-bound book from his messenger bag, a copy of Zechariah Sitchin's The 12th Planet, a book considered heresy by mainstream archaeology. The descriptions of the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came, the incredible advancements they supposedly brought, the manipulation of early human genetics. It all feels too specific, too detailed, to be mere allegory. And now, this object. This wanderer of mine. The alignment, the timing. Thorn finally sighed, a sound heavy with resignation. He leaned against his desk, his gaze drifting towards the window, where the first hint of dusk was painting the sky in hues of deep violet. "Dr. Vance," he said, his voice lower, almost a whisper, "the academic world is not prepared for such revelations. There are truths that are better left undisturbed, knowledge that carries a weight no single man can bear." He turned back to Ethan, his eyes now filled with a genuine, palpable concern. "Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. You are treading on dangerous ground." This was it. A discovery, larger and more concrete than Ethan had dared to hope for, challenging everything he thought he knew about the nature of ancient history and even his own reality. Thorn wasn't dismissing him. He was warning him. A truth, partial yet undeniably potent, connected Ethan's sterile world of astrophysics to the mythical world of ancient gods. The tension in the room, which had been a low thrum, now tightened into a palpable knot. The storm was gathering, its thunder no longer distant but echoing right outside the door. Ethan felt a jolt of exhilaration, mixed with a cold dread. He was no longer just tracking a celestial body, he was tracking a prophecy. The encounter with Dr. Thorn left Ethan in a state of heightened agitation. His mind raced, connecting disparate pieces of information, forming a mosaic of cosmic proportions. Thorn's warning, rather than deterring him, fueled his conviction. The archaeologist's almost theatrical caution confirmed Ethan's deepest suspicions. This wasn't just about an anomalous planet. It was about a concealed history, a deliberate suppression of knowledge. The subtle tremor he'd felt days ago had now escalated into a full-blown internal earthquake. The air in Havenwood felt charged, heavy, almost electric, as if the very atmosphere itself was a conductor for the immense, unspoken secrets about to be unleashed. Ethan returned to his attic observatory, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He felt a desperate urgency, a need to quantify, to prove, to make undeniable what his instincts already screamed was true. He powered up his telescope, adjusted the focus with trembling hands, and aimed it towards the faint smudge of the Wanderer. On the screen, the speck of light seemed to pulsate, almost to breathe, with an ancient, silent energy. He began to run more simulations, feeding in the new parameters Thorn's reaction had subtly confirmed. What if ancient texts weren't just mythology, but historical records, albeit metaphorically veiled? What if they contained not just stories, but precise astronomical data, encoded in religious narratives? He worked through the night, the glow of his monitors illuminating the determined set of his jaw. He immersed himself in vivid descriptions from Sumerian tablets, reading about the creation of humankind, the epic battles of the Anunnaki, their descent from the heavens, and their eventual departure. He tried to visualize the ancient city of Ur, the ziggurats reaching towards the heavens, the priests performing their rituals, observing the same celestial canvas he now studied. He heard the faint echo of their chants in his mind, smelled the dust of forgotten empires, saw the intricate carvings on tablets depicting winged beings and strange, towering figures. The sounds of his own breath, the soft whir of his computer, the distant hoot of an owl outside, they all seemed to fade, replaced by the ghost symphony of a lost civilization. Every detail, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, took on a new, profound meaning. A particular symbol, a stylized eight-pointed star, often associated with the goddess Ishtar, caught his eye. It was ubiquitous in Sumerian art, often depicted alongside images of celestial bodies. Could it represent the Wanderer? The thought sent a jolt through him. He wondered aloud, a rhetorical question whispered into the silent room. What if we've been looking at the sky but never truly seeing what's there? What if the answers were always right in front of us, cloaked in plain sight, waiting for the right moment or the right person to connect the dots? The narrator, a subtle presence within his own thoughts, seemed to pose this question directly to an unseen observer, urging a deeper reflection without breaking the narrative flow. He found himself questioning everything he'd ever learned, every established truth, every comfortable paradigm. Days bled into nights. Ethan's apartment became a war room of cosmic investigation. Empty coffee cups piled up like archaeological finds. The scent of microwave popcorn mingled with the musty odor of ancient texts. His phone vibrated with calls from concerned colleagues asking why he was missing department meetings, but he ignored them all. He was too close, too deeply embedded in the labyrinth of ancient secrets and celestial mechanics. He was on the verge of uncovering something monumental. Then came the third explosion emotional. He was cross-referencing a newly translated Akkadian text, which described a great star that periodically appeared in the sky, bringing with it both prosperity and cataclysm, when a particular phrase jumped out at him. When the red star returns, the veils shall be lifted, and the ancient pact shall be remembered. He was so engrossed that he didn't hear the gentle knock on his door. "Ethan?" He jumped, startled, dropping the tablet replica he was holding. He turned to see Dr. Thorne standing in his doorway, his face etched with a mix of urgency and grim determination. "Thorne, what are you doing here?" Ethan asked, his voice rough from lack of sleep. Thorne stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. His eyes scanned the chaotic room, taking in the charts, the texts, the glowing screens. "I saw your latest data logs. The trajectory analysis for your Wanderer is unsettlingly accurate. Too accurate." He paused, a deep sigh escaping him. "Ethan, you've stumbled onto something bigger than you realize. I tried to warn you subtly, but you're too close now. This isn't just a myth, it's a prophecy, and some powerful forces have dedicated millennia to keeping it buried." He walked over to one of Ethan's screens, pointing at the trajectory data. "This red star, as the ancients called it, isn't just a planet. It's a vessel, and it's bringing back its creators." He turned to Ethan, his eyes piercing. The biggest lie ever told wasn't that the Anunnaki were gods. The biggest lie was that they left. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. A lie discovered, a secret revealed in the worst possible moment. The pieces clicked into place with terrifying finality. This wasn't merely a coincidence, it was a deliberate grand manipulation, a cosmic deception spanning millennia. He was no longer just observing a phenomenon. He was an unwitting participant in a drama that had been unfolding since the dawn of humanity. He looked at Thorne, his mind reeling, his reality shattering. He was involved in something far, far greater than he had ever imagined. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this story has truly resonated with you. So, empower this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who needs to hear this. The revelation hung in the air, thick with the scent of old paper and the metallic tang of unspoken fear. Thorn's words, "The biggest lie was that they left," echoed in Ethan's mind, dismantling decades of scientific dogma and personal belief. Ethan felt a profound sense of disorientation, as if the floor beneath him had vanished. He stared at Thorn, searching for any sign of jest or exaggeration, but found only grim, resolute conviction. The archaeologist's face, usually so composed, was etched with a weariness that spoke of long-held burdens and profound secrets. "What do you mean they never left?" Ethan finally managed, his voice barely a whisper, a stark contrast to the hurricane raging within his skull. "Are you saying the Anunnaki are still here, or that they've been observing us, manipulating us?" His gaze flickered to the star chart, then back to the anomaly on his screen. "And this wanderer, is it their return trip?" Thorn nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Ethan's. "Not still here in the way you might imagine. More like their influence never truly departed. Their presence, their technology, their agenda, it's woven into the very fabric of our history, our mythology, our DNA. And NIBIRU, or the Wanderer, as you've named it, is indeed a vessel, a harbinger. It signifies the activation of protocols set in motion long, long ago. Protocols for their return, for the reclamation of what they consider theirs. The narrative here became more somber, deeper, more revealing. It wasn't just about ancient gods, it was about cosmic manipulation, a silent, pervasive puppeteering of human destiny. Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. He suddenly understood the true weight of Thorn's previous warnings, the almost palpable tension in the air of Havenwood. This wasn't just a town. It was a node, a point of confluence for forces that had been silently shaping humanity for millennia. He looked around his study, at the books on Sumerian mythology, at the astronomical charts, and suddenly they weren't just academic curiosities. They were pieces of a grand, terrifying puzzle, each fragment humming with a dark, ancient power. Thorn walked closer to the main monitor, his finger tracing the elliptical orbit of the Wanderer. For millennia, certain factions have guarded this secret. Not just human factions, but others, entities. They've watched, they've waited, they've ensured that humanity remained in a state of controlled ignorance, developing just enough to be useful, but never enough to truly comprehend its own origins or the true nature of its creators. Your planet, Earth, is not just a planet. It's a laboratory, a resource, a prize, and the time for harvesting is fast approaching. Ethan reeled. "Harvesting? What are you talking about?" "Resources," Thorn said flatly. "Gold, primarily, but also something far more valuable. Consciousness. The very essence of what makes us human. The Anunnaki crafted us, Ethan, not out of benevolence, but out of necessity. They needed workers, stewards for their mining operations, a compliant species, and they imbued us with a spark, a capacity for creation, for self-awareness, that was both a gift and a curse. A gift because it allowed us to evolve. A curse because it meant we would eventually seek answers, just as you are now." The silence that followed was profound, punctuated only by the distant hum of Ethan's computer and the faint ticking of an old grandfather clock in the hallway. Ethan's gaze fell upon a small, intricately carved clay tablet on his desk, an exact replica of a Sumerian artifact depicting a figure offering tribute to a winged deity. He had always seen it as a quaint piece of ancient art. Now it was a chilling depiction of servitude, of a desperate plea to beings far beyond human comprehension. He understood now that there were forces observing him, entities silently guiding his steps, or perhaps more accurately, pushing him towards this inevitable truth. He was not just an observer, he was a pawn, or perhaps a catalyst, in a cosmic game whose rules he was only just beginning to grasp. Thorn reached into his satchel, pulling out a small, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age, filled with elegant, unfamiliar script. "I've been tracking these anomalies for decades, piecing together fragments from forgotten libraries, desecrated tombs, and whispers from secret societies. This journal," he held it out to Ethan, "contains the true history, the silent prophecy. It speaks of cycles, of alignments, of a preordained return." Ethan took the journal, his fingers brushing against the ancient leather. A faint tremor ran through him. He opened it, his eyes scanning the first few lines. The script was unlike anything he had ever seen, yet it felt strangely familiar, as if it was buried deep within his subconscious. The symbols seemed to pulse, to whisper forgotten narratives directly into his mind. He looked up at Thorn, his mind reeling from the sheer magnitude of the information. The world he had known, the universe he had painstakingly mapped, had just dissolved. He was standing on the precipice of a reality far stranger, far more terrifying than any myth had ever dared to suggest. The journal felt impossibly heavy in Ethan's hands, not just from its physical weight, but from the millennia of suppressed history it represented. Its ancient pages, brittle and smelling of forgotten incense and dust, contained glyphs and symbols that seemed to dance before his eyes, almost alive. Thorn watched him, a somber witness to the dismantling of Ethan's preconceived notions. The air in the study, once merely tense, now thrummed with a palpable sense of danger. The comfortable intellectual pursuit had transmuted into something far more perilous, a deep dive into forbidden knowledge that could shatter sanity and destabilize the very foundations of human civilization. "This is," Ethan began, his voice trailing off, unable to articulate the profound sense of vertigo that gripped him. "This is beyond anything I ever imagined. The Anunnaki, NIBIRU, it's all real." He looked at Thorn, a silent plea for reassurance, for a way to reconcile this with the logical, rational world he inhabited. Thorn's expression softened, a rare display of empathy. "Real and far more complex than the myths portray. They weren't merely gods in the sense of benevolent creators. They were a technologically advanced, resource-driven species who viewed nascent humanity as a means to an end. Their interventions, their genetic tinkering, were not divine gifts, but calculated manipulations to create a servile workforce, and Earth was merely one of their outposts, a rich mine of resources." He gestured vaguely towards the window, to the mundane world of Havenwood outside. "The entire narrative of our history, our religions, our very understanding of ourselves, is built upon a foundation of their carefully constructed lies. We were told to look up to the heavens, but never to truly question what looked back." The silence returned, heavier this time, laden with the weight of revelation. Ethan felt a profound sense of fear, a primal terror that clawed at the edges of his consciousness. It wasn't just fear for himself, but for humanity, for the comfortable illusions that had sustained billions for so long. He imagined the sheer chaos, the existential crisis that would erupt if this truth were to be widely known. The loss of innocence, the shattering of faith, the complete re-evaluation of every aspect of human existence. It was a terrifying prospect. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this story has truly resonated with you. So, empower this content, hit that like button now and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Ethan's gaze lingered on the ancient script within the journal, feeling a strange pull, almost an echo in his own genetic code. The symbols, alien yet somehow familiar, seemed to hum with a silent frequency that resonated deep within his bones. He was experiencing a moment of profound emotional upheaval. Fear, yes, but also a raw, unadulterated shock. The world was not what he thought it was, and the implications were staggering. He had believed in a universe governed by immutable physical laws, by chance and evolution. Now he was being told that it was all a carefully orchestrated play, with humanity as the unwitting actors, dancing to a tune composed by extraterrestrial overlords. But "Why me?" Ethan finally asked, his voice raw. "Why are you telling me this now?" Thorn walked over to a bookshelf, pulling down a copy of an old Sumerian dictionary. "Because, Ethan, you possess a unique combination of skills. The astronomical insight to track NIBIRU, the intellectual curiosity to delve into forbidden texts, and perhaps most importantly, a certain resonance, a sensitivity to the truth, however unsettling. Others have come close, but have either been silenced or succumbed to the overwhelming nature of the revelation. You, I believe, have the capacity to not just understand, but perhaps to act." He opened the dictionary, pointing to a series of glyphs. "This journal," he tapped the one in Ethan's hands, "was passed down through a clandestine order, a lineage of keepers of the silent prophecy. My family has been part of it for generations. We've watched, we've collected, we've waited for the signs. And the Wanderer is the greatest sign of all." As Thorn spoke, a faint, almost imperceptible symbol began to glow on the clay tablet replica on Ethan's desk. It was the 8-pointed star, the very one he had noticed earlier, now pulsing with a soft, ethereal light. Ethan stared at it, mesmerized. It wasn't just old clay anymore. It was reacting, responding to the conversation, to the energy of the moment. This wasn't a trick of the light, nor an illusion born of fatigue. It was real, a symbol appearing in the wrong place, at the wrong time, awakening on its own. It was the fourth explosion emotional, a bridge between the mundane and the impossible, a physical manifestation of the ancient forces stirring around them. The line between reality and the impossible had just been ripped wide open. "What is that?" Ethan breathed, pointing a trembling finger at the glowing symbol. Thorn's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise mixed with something akin to awe crossing his face. "I've only ever read about such phenomena. It's an activation, a resonance frequency. This tablet, it's not just a replica. It's imbued with something. A fragment of their technology, perhaps. A beacon." He reached out, his finger hovering inches from the glowing star, as if afraid to touch it. "It's responding to NIBIRU's proximity, or perhaps to your proximity, Ethan, to something within you." The implications were staggering. Was Ethan himself, unknowingly, a part of this ancient design? Was there something in his lineage, something passed down through generations, that made him a key to this prophecy? The thought sent a fresh wave of terror and exhilaration through him. Thorn urged him to sit down, and Ethan slumped into his desk chair, his mind a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. The journal, the glowing tablet, Thorn's words. It was all too much, yet it felt undeniably true. He was no longer a mere observer. He was connected intrinsically to the very heart of this cosmic drama. He looked at the 8-pointed star, pulsating rhythmically, and a faint, almost inaudible whisper seemed to echo in his mind, not in words, but in a cascade of images. Towering figures in strange suits, vast cities gleaming under alien suns, a red planet orbiting a binary star, and then a smaller, bluer world, teeming with nascent life. Earth, and always the sense of being watched, observed, cultivated. This was it. The Virada 4, the moment of devastating truth. Ethan was granted access to a raw, unfiltered vision, a memory not his own, but perhaps an ancestral echo, a fragment of the past extraterrestrial. He saw what was hidden, not through a telescope or a dusty text, but through a conduit activated within him. He saw an ancient Anunnaki god, not as a myth, but as a towering, majestic, terrifyingly real being standing on a desolate plain, looking up at a vast red sky. He saw a living artifact, a crystalline structure humming with power, pulsating with an inner light embedded in the earth. He saw a portal shimmering at the edge of his vision, a gateway to realms beyond human comprehension. He saw a forbidden memory, a vivid recollection of humanity's genetic manipulation, of the Anunnakis' ruthless efficiency in engineering a species for their own purposes. It was a vision that tore through his rational mind, leaving behind a profound sense of wonder and horror. This Virada was grand, intense, cinematic, but it still left something larger pending. The ultimate revelation, he knew, had to be even more profound. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this story has truly resonated with you. So, empower this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who needs to hear this. The vision, sharp and overwhelming, receded, leaving Ethan breathless and disoriented. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden heavy silence of the room. The glowing symbol on the clay tablet dimmed, its ethereal light fading back into the dull gleam of ancient earthenware. He blinked, trying to reorient himself, to reconcile the stark reality of his study with the impossible grandeur of the images that had just seared themselves into his mind. He tasted ozone and dust, felt the phantom vibration of ancient machines, and smelled the metallic tang of an alien atmosphere. His rational mind screamed for an explanation, for a scientific framework to contain this profound, almost spiritual assault on his senses, but there was none. Thorn watched him, his expression a complex mixture of concern and a strange, knowing satisfaction. "You saw it, didn't you?" he murmured, his voice gentle, a glimpse behind the veil. "The truth, unvarnished and raw." Ethan could only nod, his throat tight, unable to form words. He had seen. He had witnessed the inconceivable. The Anunnaki weren't just ancient visitors. They were cosmic architects, genetic engineers, beings of immense power and unfathomable motives. And NIBIRU, the Wanderer, was not just a planet. It was a mobile command center, a generational vessel, a silent sentinel now returning to claim its dominion. The profound shift in his understanding was like the breaking of a dam, unleashing a torrent of new, terrifying possibilities. The feeling of peril grew, an insidious tendril creeping into every corner of his perception. He was no longer safe in his quiet Havenwood home. He was now a target, a witness who had seen too much, connected too deeply. He realized with a chilling certainty that if Thorn knew, and if Thorn's keepers of the silent prophecy knew, then so too did the forces that sought to suppress this truth. The very air seemed to crackle with an unseen energy, a silent war being waged in the shadows, and he, Ethan Vance, was now undeniably at its epicenter. His initial fear transformed into a more profound, existential terror, a gut-wrenching realization of humanity's true, precarious position in the cosmos. He stumbled to his feet, his legs unsteady beneath him. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "What do we do now?" he asked Thorn, his voice hoarse, a desperate plea for guidance. "If this is real, if they're coming back, what hope do we have?" Thorn's eyes were grave. "Hope, Ethan, lies in awareness, in understanding. The Anunnaki, despite their advanced technology, operate within certain cosmic laws, certain cycles. Their return is not merely a random event, it is tied to astronomical alignments, to the awakening of certain energetic signatures on Earth, and the time for their full remanifestation is rapidly approaching. The silent prophecy speaks of this cycle, of the signs that herald their physical return." He pointed to another page in the journal, filled with intricate diagrams that looked like a blend of astronomical charts and sacred geometry. "These are the keys, the timelines. We have to decipher them fully, to understand the precise window of their arrival, and more importantly, their agenda once they are here." The atmosphere in the room grew dense, heavy with the weight of ancient secrets and impending doom. The narrative accelerated, not in a rush of action, but in the relentless accumulation of terrifying truths. Ethan felt like he was hurtling towards an unavoidable precipice. Every passing minute, every faint hum of his equipment, every gust of wind outside seemed to whisper of their approach. He looked at Thorn, this man who had carried this burden for so long and understood the profound loneliness of such knowledge. He remembered a conversation he'd overheard years ago at a scientific conference. A renowned astrophysicist, Dr. Eleanor Reed, had dismissed ancient astronaut theories with a scoff, stating, "Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and what these fringe theories offer is nothing more than fantastical interpretations of primitive beliefs." At the time, Ethan had agreed, intellectually. Now he realized that the evidence was not just extraordinary, it was woven into the very fabric of existence, waiting to be unraveled. The greatest deception was not a single lie, but the construction of an entire reality, designed to obscure a deeper, more inconvenient truth. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this story has truly resonated with you. So, empower this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who needs to hear this. The weight of the impending revelation pressed down on Ethan, a physical ache in his chest. He spent the next few days in a relentless pursuit of knowledge, collaborating intensely with Thorn. Their dynamic was a fascinating blend of scientific rigor and ancient wisdom, Ethan providing the astronomical calculations and modern data, Thorn deciphering the cryptic symbols and prophecies within the journal. They were two unlikely allies, united by a truth too monumental to bear alone. The narrative now spiraled deeper into the esoteric, blending astrophysics with Sumerian mythology, quantum mechanics with ancient ritual. They discussed stargates, wormholes, advanced propulsion systems described in tablets that modern science was only beginning to theorize. The prophecy speaks of the alignment of the three suns, Thorn explained one evening, tracing a complex diagram in the journal. Not three physical suns, but three powerful celestial bodies aligning. Our sun, a distant binary star known as Alpha Centauri, and NIBIRU itself. This alignment creates a specific energy conduit, a gateway, allowing for instantaneous travel across vast cosmic distances. It's their highway, their interdimensional portal. Ethan stared at the diagram, his mind racing. A gravitational singularity, a resonance cascade through specific cosmic filaments. It sounds like something out of theoretical physics, but on a scale we can barely comprehend. He cross-referenced Thorn's diagrams with his own simulations of the Wanderer's trajectory, and a chilling realization dawned on him. The alignment. It's happening sooner than I calculated. My initial data didn't account for these additional gravitational influences. If NIBIRU is indeed drawing energy from Alpha Centauri, its acceleration will be far greater. The window of return isn't decades away, Thorn. It's years, perhaps even months. A profound sense of urgency, sharper than anything he had felt before, gripped Ethan. The air in his study felt thin, as if the oxygen was being consumed by the sheer magnitude of their discovery. The silent hum of his equipment seemed to intensify, transforming into a low, resonant thrum that vibrated in his very bones. He pictured the vastness of space, the serene beauty of the stars, and then overlaid it with the grim reality of the approaching Wanderer, a colossal ancient vessel carrying beings who considered humanity their property. The thought was sickening, chilling him to the core. They worked tirelessly, fueled by adrenaline and the grim knowledge of what was at stake. Ethan neglected his classes entirely, ignoring the increasingly urgent emails and calls from the university dean. His life outside this secret mission had ceased to exist. His apartment, once a place of quiet solitude, was now a nexus of cosmic revelation, a beacon drawing unseen attention. He could feel it, a subtle shift in the shadows outside his windows, a faint whisper on the wind that wasn't just the autumn breeze. They were being watched. Then came the final explosion emotional, a culminating blow that solidified Ethan's commitment and shattered any remaining vestiges of his old life. He and Thorn were deep into the labyrinthine prophecies, trying to pinpoint the exact trigger event for the Anunnaki's final descent. The journal described a gesture of defiance that would be made by a chosen one when the red star was at its zenith. It was cryptic, symbolic, yet felt profoundly significant. As Ethan read a particular passage aloud, describing a star-seed awakening, the ancient clay tablet on his desk, the one with the glowing eight-pointed star, suddenly levitated. It floated gently in the air, spinning slowly, emitting a soft, resonant hum that filled the room. Then, with a sudden, silent surge of energy, it projected a holographic image onto the wall. It wasn't the blurry, indistinct vision from before. This was a fully formed three-dimensional representation of a vast crimson planet, scarred and ancient, its surface teeming with colossal alien cities, and surrounding it, a fleet of immense disc-shaped vessels, metallic and gleaming, descending towards a smaller blue-green world, Earth. But it was what happened next that truly shattered Ethan. Within the holographic image, a single towering figure emerged from one of the vessels. Its form was majestic, awe-inspiring, yet utterly terrifying. It was an Anunnaki, undeniable and real, its eyes glowing with an ancient, cold intelligence. And then the figure did something unexpected, something that went against all logic. It raised a hand, not in a gesture of aggression, but in a strange, almost benevolent salute towards the viewer, towards Ethan. And in that moment, a voice, ancient and resonant, yet undeniably internal, echoed within Ethan's mind. Welcome, inheritor. The cycle completes. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this story has truly resonated with you. So, empower this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who needs to hear this. The voice, a deep, resonating hum that vibrated not in his ears, but in the very core of his being, left Ethan stunned, paralyzed by a mixture of terror and an almost intoxicating sense of destiny. The holographic projection of NIBIRU and its fleet shimmered, then slowly dissolved, and the clay tablet gently descended back to his desk, its light fading completely. He stood there, trembling, grappling with the profound impact of the direct communication. The Anunnaki weren't just returning, they were aware of him, speaking to him, calling him an inheritor. What did that even mean? He had acted without understanding why, driven by an instinct he couldn't articulate, and now the universe was responding. Thorn, who had witnessed the entire spectacle, was equally shaken, his face pale, his eyes wide, with a mixture of awe and fear. An echo, a direct interface, he murmured, almost to himself. The tablet. It's more than a beacon. It's a key, a conduit. And you, Ethan, you've activated it. You've been chosen. Chosen. The word resonated with an ominous weight. Ethan felt like a puppet whose strings had just been tugged by a cosmic entity, forcing him into a role he never sought. He looked at Thorn, then back at the inert clay tablet. His rational mind struggled, desperately trying to find an explanation, a scientific framework for the impossible. But there was none. He had just experienced a direct, undeniable communication with an ancient extraterrestrial intelligence. The truth was not just devastating, it was personal. The atmosphere in the study grew dense, thick with a charged energy that pressed in on them. The mystery had deepened, yes, but also solidified into an undeniable reality. The cycle was indeed completing, and Ethan was not merely an observer, but a central, perhaps unwilling player. The narrative accelerated, a heart racing in alert. The next few hours were a blur of frantic calculations, desperate cross-referencing, and intense debate between Ethan and Thorn. They pored over the remaining sections of the journal, deciphering its final, most cryptic prophecies. The silent prophecy spoke of the Great Reckoning, a moment when humanity would be forced to confront its true origins and choose its destiny. They focused on a series of star charts within the journal, which, when overlaid with Ethan's contemporary astronomical data, revealed a precise time and location for the alignment. a remote, desolate region in the American Southwest, known for its inexplicable geological anomalies and indigenous legends of sky people. The date was alarmingly close, exactly 1 week from now. The climax was no longer a theoretical possibility, it was an imminent reality. The prophecy states that at the precise moment of alignment, a portal will open, Thorn explained, his voice hushed, tracing a final diagram, a gateway between their dimension and ours. It's not a physical structure, but an energetic aperture, a tear in the fabric of space-time, and through it they will fully manifest. Ethan felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. And what happens then? What is the great reckoning? Thorn's gaze met his, grave and resigned. The prophecy is vague on the specifics, but the underlying message is clear. Humanity will be judged. Our stewardship of this planet, our capacity for self-governance, our very right to exist as an independent species, it will all be evaluated. And the inheritor, you, Ethan, will play a pivotal role in that judgment. You are the link, the bridge between their world and ours. Ethan stood up, pacing the small room, his mind a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. The thought of confronting such beings, of being the sole voice for humanity, was overwhelming. He was an astrophysicist, a man of science, not a diplomat or a prophet, yet the voice in his head, the holographic vision, the glowing tablet, it all pointed to an undeniable truth. His destiny had been woven into this ancient narrative long before he was born. He felt a strange, illogical urge to go, to face whatever was coming, even if it meant his own destruction. It was a decision that went against all logic, driven by something deep within him, something ancestral, a call he couldn't ignore. If this content has opened your mind, comment below. I saw what he saw. This helps us understand who is truly seeking knowledge beyond the surface. Like the video, subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell, because the next episodes will go even deeper. And don't leave without clicking the next video. It's the continuation of this journey. The final hours leading up to the designated alignment were a blur of frantic preparation and an almost surreal sense of calm. Ethan and Thorn, now a singular unit driven by shared purpose, packed essentials. Specialized instruments for detecting exotic energy signatures, survival gear for the harsh desert environment, and of course the ancient journal and the now inert clay tablet. The air around them felt heavy, charged with an unspoken anticipation, as if the very fabric of reality was thinning, preparing for an unprecedented intrusion. Every rustle of leaves outside his window, every distant siren, seemed to carry a hidden meaning, a subtle warning or a cryptic message. The world was holding its breath. They traveled by night, a long, silent drive across state lines, under a sky that felt both vast and oppressively close. Ethan navigated, his eyes constantly scanning the rearview mirror, a gnawing suspicion that they were being followed. Thorn, stoic and resolute, clutched the journal, occasionally murmuring passages to himself, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. The landscape shifted from the familiar green hills of New England to the stark, breathtaking vistas of the American Southwest. Vast stretches of red rock, ancient canyons carved by time and wind, and a sky so expansive it seemed to swallow the stars whole. This place, raw and primal, felt like the perfect stage for a cosmic drama. As they approached the coordinates Thorn had deciphered, the air grew noticeably colder, despite the desert heat. A strange, resonant hum began to vibrate through the earth, a low thrum that Ethan felt in his teeth, in his bones. The navigation system on his dashboard flickered, then died, the magnetic fields in the area going haywire. Ethan pulled over, the dust settling around them in a thick reddish cloud. Ahead, in the pale pre-dawn light, a massive monolithic rock formation loomed, unlike anything he had ever seen. It wasn't natural. Its sharp angles and impossible symmetry hinted at an artificial origin. an ancient construction hidden in plain sight. "This is it," Thorn said, his voice barely a whisper, his gaze fixed on the monolith. "The gateway arch, as the prophecy calls it, the focal point." They hiked the rest of the way, the ground beneath their feet growing increasingly strange. The sand shimmered with an unnatural phosphorescence, and strange crystalline structures jutted from the earth like petrified alien flora. The hum intensified, a symphony of frequencies that bordered on painful. Ethan's instruments, when he managed to get them to function sporadically, registered off-the-charts energy spikes, anomalies that defied all known physics. He felt a profound sense of awe, mixed with a chilling terror. He was not just on Earth. He was on sacred, forbidden ground, a meeting point between worlds. As the first rays of dawn painted the eastern sky in fiery oranges and deep purples, they reached the base of the monolith. It was enormous, dwarfing them, its surface etched with glyphs and symbols identical to those in Thorn's journal, but on a scale that was overwhelming. The eight-pointed star, the symbol of the Wanderer, was carved prominently at its apex, now glowing with a faint internal light mirroring the dormant clay tablet. And then it happened. The sky above the monolith began to ripple, not like heat haze but like water. A distortion, a shimmering vortex of pure energy began to form, slowly at first, then expanding rapidly, twisting the light of the rising sun into impossible spectra. The hum intensified to a deafening roar, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. Ethan staggered, clutching his head, overwhelmed by the sensory assault. In the heart of the vortex, a distant point of crimson light appeared, growing steadily larger, clearer, NIBIRU, and around it the colossal disc-shaped vessels shimmering into existence, breaking through the veil between dimensions. The portal ripped open, a cosmic maw yawning over the ancient monolith, sucking the very air from their lungs. The crimson hue of NIBIRU, now vividly clear and terrifyingly massive, dominated the sky, casting an otherworldly pallor over the desert landscape. Its surface was a tapestry of ancient scars, immense canyons, and impossible structures, gleaming with an internal light. Around it, the fleet of immense vessels, not sleek and metallic as Ethan had imagined, but organic and ancient, like colossal living organisms, positioned themselves with silent, menacing precision. The roar of the portal was beyond sound, a frequency that resonated directly within their minds, threatening to tear their sanity apart. Ethan and Thorn fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the sheer power and scale of the manifestation. Ethan's instruments, which had finally flickered to life, shrieked in protest, their screens a chaotic mess of off-the-charts readings, before they too died. The energy emanating from the portal was immense, unimaginable, a raw outpouring of cosmic force. And through it, descending slowly, majestically, a single vast craft emerged, larger than any building, shimmering with an iridescent sheen. It was not a conventional spaceship. It was a living artifact, pulsing with an inner light, its surface a complex mosaic of shifting patterns and glyphs. As the craft hovered silently above the monolith, a ramp extended downwards, crafted from the same living, shimmering material. And then they emerged. Not two or three, but a multitude of figures, tall and regal, their forms cloaked in flowing robes that seemed woven from starlight. They were the Anunnaki, not gods of myth, but beings of flesh and blood, yet so utterly alien, so profoundly powerful, that the distinction felt irrelevant. Their skin was an ethereal pale, their eyes large and luminous, filled with an ancient, cold intelligence that seemed to pierce through Ethan's very soul. They moved with an almost dreamlike grace, their presence radiating an aura of immense authority and barely contained power. One figure, taller and more regal than the others, stepped forward, its gaze sweeping across the desert, then settling directly on Ethan and Thorn. It was the being from Ethan's holographic vision, the one that had called him Inheritor. This was Virada 5, the final disintegration of all illusion. This was the moment of complete truth, an ancestral secret laid bare. The being raised a hand, and the roaring energy of the portal, the deafening hum, the shaking earth, all subsided into a profound, terrifying silence. The only sound was the wind, a lonely whisper across the desert, and the frantic beating of Ethan's own heart. The Anunnaki's gaze fixed on Ethan, unwavering, penetrating, and then a voice, calm and clear, yet resonating with the same internal quality as the tablet's message, spoke directly into Ethan's mind. It wasn't a language of words, but of pure thought, of raw information cascading directly into his consciousness. Ethan Vance, inheritor. The cycle of cultivation is complete. We return to assess the harvest. You were chosen not by chance, but by design. Your lineage, genetically altered, seeded with the capacity for both our knowledge and your species' unique spark, has been monitored for millennia. You are the culmination, the interface. The purpose of humanity, the grand experiment, comes to its intended conclusion. The message was a devastating blow, not just to his understanding of the universe, but to his very identity. He wasn't just human, he was a product, a meticulously engineered creation, a part of a larger cosmic game. His free will, his individuality, his entire existence felt like a carefully managed illusion. The origin of humanity, the manipulation of history, the silent prophecy of their return, it all converged in this single, terrifying moment. The truth was not delivered as an answer, but as an impact, something that changed everything, but that the spectator, Ethan, and by extension us, must interpret. The Anunnaki continued, their thoughts flowing into Ethan's mind, painting vivid pictures of humanity's true history, the initial seeding of Earth, the genetic splicing with Homo erectus to create Homo sapiens for gold mining, the construction of ancient megalithic sites as energy nodes and navigational beacons, the periodic interventions to guide human development, to prevent self-destruction, and to maintain the grand experiment until the time of their return. It was a story of manipulation, of control, of a species that viewed Earth and its inhabitants as little more than a vast, sprawling farm. Ethan looked at Thorn, who was also receiving the direct mental communication, his face etched with a similar horror and understanding. They were witnessing the ultimate truth, the complete dismantling of every historical, religious, and scientific narrative. The final decision, the Great Reckoning, was not a benevolent judgment, but a cold, calculating evaluation of humanity's utility. The tall Anunnaki finally spoke through Ethan's mind again, its voice reverberating with cosmic authority. The question remains, are you, the inheritors, worthy of continued existence, or is the harvest complete? Your future, and the future of this planet, now rests upon our judgment. The being then turned, its luminous eyes sweeping across the vast expanse of the desert, towards the distant horizon where human civilization continued, oblivious. It made no overt move, no grand gesture of conquest. Its presence alone was enough. The narrative did not provide an answer. It simply left the profound, unsettling question hanging in the air, a mark on the minds of those who witnessed or heard this silent prophecy. What would humanity's judgment be? The colossal Anunnaki remained silent, its gaze fixed on the distant, unsuspecting world, leaving the profound question of humanity's fate echoing in Ethan's mind. The air, once filled with the roar of the portal, was now utterly still, a heavy, silent witness to the cosmic judgment unfolding. NIBIRU hung motionless in the sky, a silent crimson giant, observing its ancient laboratory. The fleet of organic vessels pulsed with a muted inner light, like patiently waiting predators. The silence was more terrifying than any scream, for it signified the absolute power and indifferent judgment of beings beyond human comprehension. Ethan looked at Thorn, whose face was a mask of grim understanding. The archaeologist nodded almost imperceptibly, a shared acknowledgement of the impossible truth they now bore witness to. They were mere specks in this vast unfolding drama, the last human witnesses to a secret as old as time itself. The true nature of the Anunnaki was not that of benevolent gods, nor malevolent demons, but simply that of a vastly superior species, acting according to their own logic, their own needs, their own ancient protocols. Humanity was not the center of the universe, it was merely a carefully managed project. The final revelation was not a definitive answer, but an overwhelming impact. It reshaped everything Ethan thought he knew, about himself, about his species, about the universe. The Anunnaki had not come to conquer with fire and brimstone, but to evaluate, to reclaim, to decide the future of their creation. The silent prophecy was now undeniably manifest, and its implications stretched across the entire span of human history and into an uncertain future. The tall Anunnaki shifted its weight, a movement so subtle, yet radiating such immense power that it seemed to ripple through the very air. Its luminous eyes, ancient and knowing, finally returned to Ethan. The connection, the inheritance, was clear. He was not just a recipient of information, he was a conduit, a living bridge between two vastly different species, a testament to the Anunnaki's long-term genetic planning. He felt a strange, inexplicable certainty that his journey was far from over, that this encounter was merely the beginning of a much larger, more terrifying chapter. The portal behind NIBIRU began to slowly contract, the shimmering vortex gradually closing, pulling the colossal vessels back into the depths of another dimension. The hum, which had previously been deafening, now began to fade, a gradual diminuendo into silence. The crimson light of NIBIRU softened, becoming a distant, enigmatic star once more. The figures of the Anunnaki began to recede, re-entering their magnificent craft, which slowly ascended back towards the retreating portal. They left no trace, no physical evidence of their monumental presence, save for the profound, indelible mark left upon the minds of Ethan Vance and Aris Thorne. As the last flicker of the portal vanished, and the first rays of the true sun painted the desert in familiar, earthly colors, the monolith remained, silent and unmoving, a colossal tombstone marking a meeting of worlds. The hum in the earth ceased. The cold in the air dissipated. The world returned to its mundane rhythm, utterly oblivious to the silent judgment that had just occurred. Ethan stood there, looking up at the now empty sky, a sky that would forever be changed in his eyes. The questions lingered, sharp and relentless. What was their judgment? What would happen next? Were they truly gone, or merely retreating into the shadows once more, waiting for the next cycle, the next alignment? The narrator, a subtle, guiding presence, slowly recedes, leaving these questions hanging in the vast, echoing silence of the desert. This story, Ethan's story, was not an ending. It was merely a piece of something much larger. A single chapter in a cosmic epic that stretched beyond the boundaries of human comprehension. So, the silent prophecy has been heard, the shadows of ancient Anunnaki gods have stirred. What will you do with this knowledge? Escreva nos comentários. Eu vi o que ele viu. Inscreva-se para seguir os próximos capítulos dessa verdade esquecida. Se essa história mexeu com você, deixe seu like. Isso mostra que você está pronto para ouvir o que vem depois.